Hi everyone, it's Phil from Ashland Leather, and we're back again with another private stock event. I'm so excited to show you about 100 items that we'll be releasing this Friday on the private stock page at 12 p.m. noon Central Time. And again, that date is September 27th. We have about 100 different private stock items that will be released on Friday, including some new experimental shell cordovan colors, psychedelic shell cordovan, new shell cordovan colors. We've got some wax flesh chrome excel, as well as a fan favorite, the Western texture. All right, let's get into it. We're gonna start with some psychedelic shell cordovan. What we have right here is a Fat Herbie with this brand new look of psychedelic shell cordovan. It's a little bit different than some of the psychedelic shells that we've had before. We sort of had these more streaky, sort of swirly looks in a couple different colors. So this one has a bit of a blue as well as a magenta coming through, and that blue translates a little bit more green, more like a dark forest green when it sits on top of these lighter natural colors. And let's look at the backside of this Fat Herbie where we have some more of that incredible psychedelic shell, sort of violet, magenta, a little bits of that blue in here as well. And for several of the items, we're going to be including some matching key fobs also in the psychedelic shell cordovan. So let's look at the outside of this Herbie first with more of that really cool patterning. The psychedelic shell has layers of colors, usually 2 or 3. This one has some magenta, violet, as well as some of that blue shade. Also, this Fat Herbie is hand stitched. And on the inside, we have a little bit of a color variation on that psychedelic shell, a little bit more green on the interior. We also have the Horwin USA measuring machine stamp, and here's the matching key fob that goes with this one. We got a lot to go through, so we'll go kind of quickly. Up next is a Tony the Ant, also in the psychedelic shell. Really cool pattern of this psychedelic shell. A little bit more of those swirly, sort of streaky looks. We also have the matching key fob for this guy as well. Let's look at the inside. We have more psychedelic shell cordovan. And here's another great one with a matching key fob. Psychedelic shell here. This one looks more like a normal piece of reverse, although we do see some layers of color, a little bit of the violet color on the right. This is a tall Tony the Ant, and on the inside we have vertical card slots. That's a really striking piece of psychedelic shell for the interior. So here's what the matching key fob looks like with this guy. And here's another one that is one of my favorites. This is our Bugs Moran wallet. It's a simple card holder designed for a minimalist. There's no bill slot on this one. We have a contrasting teal color hand stitching for this Bugs Moran. And on the inside, it's got vertical card slots, which has also become very popular over the last year or so. So we started making more of these. And then we have some more of that amazing psychedelic shell on the inside. And I think we only have one Capone in this batch. Everybody that's picked up one of the Capone mystery boxes, thank you guys so much. And this Capone here is incredibly striking. We've got really great range of color in this piece of psychedelic shell. We also have a really cool orange hand stitching going on the outside, which seems to be a popular color choice for a lot of hand stitching options. And here's a look at the interior. Now let's switch it up away from the psychedelic for a moment. This is a tall Herbie, which is just like our Fat Herbie, except we have the bill slot that extends all the way to the top. You'll notice in this drop, we have a lot of larger pattern pieces, including the tall Herbie and the Fat Herbie, because we really wanted to showcase a little bit more context of the psychedelic shell and the marbled shell cordovan, like this marbled color 8 piece here. Really nice color range, a little bit of a burgundy red tone that fades down into an orangey tan. And on the inside of this one, we have some of that psychedelic shell, although it's matching a little bit more of like the amaretto color. You can see some of that orange kind of amaretto shade on the inside center. Then we've got some greenish blue and purple on the right. Now here's another really cool tall Herbie. We're calling this psychedelic shell as well, although it's a totally different effect. It's sort of more of like drip marks, which I happen to really like. A little bit of green color on those drip marks alongside of some of that orangey, more amaretto shade. We have a nice hand-stayed edge on this piece, and then more of that psychedelic on the interior. That's a really striking tall Herbie, and we have this matching key fob. One quick note about the key fobs. If you've been following along our little company here for the last few years, we used to have a design that was just like this, the stitched key fob. It's one piece of leather wrapped over itself. We've decided to come back to this piece and reintroduce it to be a little bit more upgraded. So this is a solid copper key ring, and it's very thick and heavy. A little bit more of a premium effect on these key fobs, and we should be releasing these soon. And the small zip wallet has become very popular over the last year or so since we've introduced it. We've got a nice piece of psychedelic shell for this small zip wallet. You can see the color range, a little bit more pink and magenta to some more of those greenish blues. And on the inside of this, we have very thin black horsehide. And I have another small zip here in the Psychedelic shell cordovan. Each piece of Psychedelic is totally random. So most of the products that you're seeing in the video here will have their own unique product page. Let's take a second to examine the interior of the small zip. We have this nice section in the center that we envisioned would be good for coins or even an air tag. And then we have card slots on the right and on the left. And then we have these gusseted sections that expand on each side. And I noticed when I use this wallet, those are where I put my most used cards. And here's a total stunner. Another Psychedelic piece, but this time it's a little bit more orange and tan with some of those green shades as well. Now this is, you'll notice it's reverse cordovan, so we've hand glazed it in to give it a nice polished look. We also have some hand stitching on this wallet. Here's a look at the exterior with more of the Psychedelic shell. A couple more Psychedelic pieces to show you. Tony the Ant this time, Psychedelic shell with that magenta, violet, and green. We have a matching key fob for this guy. And here's a look at the exterior. Really like the look of this one. And yet another cool variation on the Psychedelic. This is a little bit more pink and purple with a purple hand stitching. This is our Bugs Moran wallet with the vertical card slots. On the exterior, you've got a little bit of a darker section of purple on the right, and a little bit more ultraviolet and magenta on the left. And yet another piece of Psychedelic shell. This is more of the green and purple variant. We have the matching key fob for this Bugs Moran as well. On the exterior of this Bugs, we've got a Scotch grain texture on green shell cordovan, and then we sort of capped it all off with the violet hand-stained edges, which I think plays off that purple and green concept very nicely. And we wanted to include some smaller pieces to get more Psychedelic shell out into people's hands. Here's another piece of Psychedelic shell on a one-shot card case, and this one is hand-stitched with a candy cane stitching. So if you look closely, each of those stitches are alternating colors, and I really like that effect. It seems like people have been interested in that from us as well. But the Psychedelic on here, I think, is really the star. Here's another Psychedelic shell piece. This one is not hand-stitched, so you can see the difference in the stitching. The biggest thing about the hand-stitching is the thickness of the thread is much larger. In fact, you cannot put this large of a thread through the machines. So my suggestion to people interested in the difference between both, I would really only recommend doing the hand stitch if you like the look of a thicker, more bold and chunky thread appearance. And the machine stitching is just a little bit more clean and consistent and a little bit more refined, you could say, because this thread is a little bit smaller. And here's another Psychedelic piece, a little bit more tan, yellow underneath, some of that amaretto drip marks to a little bit more green. And I have a Psychedelic shell cordovan Apple watch band. You can see this one has some of that pinkish magenta that fades into green. And in this particular one, we have silver hardware, but we could also replace it for black hardware like I have on my Apple watch band. And I got a few Bic lighter and lighter sheaths also in the Psychedelic shell. This first one here has that really cool candy cane hand stitching with a green and blue shade that sort of accent the colors in the Psychedelic shell. Here's a look at another one. I really like this look, maybe because it's novel and I haven't seen it before, but a little bit tan, orange, and green. And here's another one with a candy cane hand stitching that also plays off the colors in the leather. So we have an alternating cream and orange color stitching. And don't worry, if you're not a fan of that Psychedelic look, which I realize is pretty aggressive, we have some new shell cordovan experimental finishes. This one we're calling experimental olive finish, and this is a raw variation, which is the only one that exists at the moment. We left it this nice matte finish because we really liked the look of this sort of greenish bronze color. And this one is totally striking in person. I really hope that this color translates over the video. It's a really nice pale green, sort of yellowy bronze color. This is made on our tall Tony the Ant that's hand stitched as well. And here's a look at the inside with some more of that experimental olive finish. And I have one more piece of the experimental raw olive finish. This is our normal Tony the Ant, and it's actually a good opportunity for me to showcase the difference between the tall Tony the Ant here and our standard classic traditional Tony the Ant on the left. The traditional Tony the Ant has this bill slot with a thumb notch that's a little bit lower than the other one. The tall Tony the Ant fits some larger international currencies, so non-US dollars. If you have like a tall euro or a tall yen, they fit more appropriately into the tall Tony the Ant. So this is more about the finish. I really like the look of this raw olive. So let me know what you think about this new color in the comments. And I mentioned we had some wax flesh chrome excel, and this is an even more special version. So this is actually natural plainsman chrome excel, which is the full grain version of Horween's chrome excel leather. You can see the grain on the inside center of this wallet, and we just flip that leather backwards which is what you're seeing on the outside. This is actually the rough out suede side of the leather. A lot of people call it the flesh side. And then they apply a little bit of a resin finish to fill in the fibers of that flesh and then iron it smooth. So you get an effect and a product that Horween calls wax flesh. So this is natural wax flesh Plainsman Chrome Excel, which is a mouthful. And I really expect this to wear in nicely. I think once these fibers become roughed up just by normal use, you'll start to see a little bit of a depth of color, but also a depth of texture, which I think is what people look for in the wax flesh, especially on footwear. And I've seen some really cool boots made out of Horween's wax flesh leather, and it really ages nicely. So I'm excited to see what people do with these wallets and how they age. In fact, if you want to check out some other leather that has been worn, check out the Ashland Leather Patina Masters group on Facebook. We've got a great group of people over there showing the patina on their wallets in all sorts of different leathers. So you can sort of get a sneak peek preview into the future of what your wallet's gonna look like. Here's another piece of that wax flesh on the Tony the Ant. And of course, we couldn't leave out my favorite wallet style. This is the Fat Herbie in natural wax flesh Plainsman Chrome Excel. And then I have some more marbled shell cordovan. This is marbled color 8 shell cordovan on the Fat Herbie. You can see the range of color in the marbled color 8. Goes from that orangey tan to the burgundy and then all the colors in between. Here's a look at the interior of this Fat Herbie. And I got another cool combination here. This is our Bugs Moran wallet in the marbled color 8 shell. You'll notice our traditional card slots on the left and vertical card slots on the right. We've got a combination of those two for this Bugs. And this one is also hand stitched with a contrasting cream color thread. On the outside, we have one additional card slot as well. So we're calling this the quick access card slot. And I'll spin this around so you can see the true range of color in the marbled shells. It's really dynamic. I have so much more to show you, so we're gonna speed it along. Western natural shell cordovan on this Bugs Moran, hand stitched. And then we also have that same combination of the traditional and vertical card slots. Here's another one in a very special leather. This is the 1940s calfskin from Horween. This was tanned in the 1940s, and I think there's only a tiny bit left of it. So this is one of the last wallets that you'll ever see in the 1940s calf. We have the quick access card slot on the back. You can see the really cool figuring that we decided to cut into this wallet. So it sort of highlights the spine of the Bugs. Hopefully you can see that texture I'm referencing. And here's a look at the inside with vertical card slots. Here's another one with vertical card slots, English Tan Dublin on this Bugs Moran. You can see the Horween ink stamp, which means we have Horween shell cordovan on the outside. And this is raw natural shell cordovan with a hand stained edge. Here's another vertical Bugs Moran. This time it's got another brand new leather. This is something we haven't done before. Natural Latigo. And this is actually not true natural. We're trying to match the color of Horween's natural shell cordovan. So experimenting with the Latigo for the interiors because it's really hard for us to get thin pieces of shell cordovan. So you can imagine a future here, and we're trying to make some more wallets in the thin variations with this new, let's call it natural shell colored Latigo. I'll have to come up with a better color name for that, but it allows us to get more opportunity to make more stuff. On the outside, we have natural shell cordovan, of course, which does match that color on the inside pretty well. And another new one, I don't think we've done this before, and if we have, I might have mislabeled the color. On the outside of this is actually Horween's Mocha shell cordovan. It's sort of between a cigar and a color 4, almost close to color 4, but a little bit less red. So it's a really interesting shade, this Mocha. I'll dwell on this for a second just so you can see the range of color and sort of that parlor trick that we like to talk about, the directionality of color in the cordovan. At this angle, it's very light, and as I spin it, it sort of changes color right before your eyes into that little bit darker shade. On the inside of this one, we have some brown cypress and other beautiful vertical Bugs here. This is color 8 marbled shell cordovan or marbled color 8 shell cordovan. Here's another cool one. We put Psychedelic on the interior of this vertical Bugs, and on the exterior, we've got some marbled shell. And this is actually one of my favorites from the entire batch, which is kind of a sneaky favorite. This is classic color number 8 shell cordovan, the dark brown burgundy shade that cordovan is sort of known for, the classic cordovan color. We've got the matching hand-stained edges for this one, as well as color 8 shell on the inside with gold foil stamps. And then we have the alternating Scotch grain for the middle 2 card slots. And up next, we have a vertical 8 slot Bugs Moran. This is also in that Mocha shell cordovan, but the 8 slots have one additional card slot on each side. Here's another one in that new Latigo. I'll have to come up with a good color name for this. It sort of matches that natural shell. This one has the natural shell on the outside, but this is the vertical 8 slot. And here's an absolute killer wallet. Marbled blue shell cordovan with blue hand stitching. It's a little bit more of like a teal hand stitching. And this is the tall Tony the Ant. I'll let you have a good look at the marbled shell on the exterior because this is also really, really nice. And I mentioned at the top that we had some Western shell. This has become a fan favorite. People really like this Western texture, and I really do too. It's my favorite texture that Horween does. This is made in natural shell cordovan with the Western texture on the tall Tony the Ant. And the inside, we have those classic card slots. One of the reasons I like the tall variations on the Tony and the Herbie is you can get a consistent look throughout the inside as well as the outside because we don't have to worry about flipping this middle piece around. And speaking of consistent insides, here's another tall Tony the Ant with marbled color 8 shell cordovan. And here's a look at the outside. And you know what? I absolutely lied to you because we do have a couple more components. This one has reverse green shell cordovan on top of marbled green. The back card slot is natural shell. And on the inside, we've got some reverse green shell. And I also can't believe I forgot about this. Black chrome excel. We used to do a lot of black chrome excel wallets and sort of slowly moved it out in favor of the black Dublin, which is a little bit more grainy than the chrome excel. As you can see, the chrome excel is very polished in, flat and smooth. And I think people are going to want to see chrome excel, so we're going to start to introduce it again. So I have a black chrome excel Capone money clip. And then we have a 13th anniversary black chrome excel lucky wallet. I think this was supposed to have been included in our 13th anniversary celebration, but we've got it back for you here now. And I have so many more wallets. I'm gonna have to abbreviate this. I don't think we're gonna be able to look at all of them, but I'm gonna show you a couple of my favorites. This one is marbled shell cordovan. I don't know what to call this color, but I think it's marbled color 8. It has this really beautiful sort of sunset look where it has a light color on the bottom that fades in 3 distinct phases, which is really nice, sort of like a natural on the bottom, more like a color 4 in the middle, and then a darker color 8 on the top. This is one of the only Johnny the Foxes in the drop. We also have marbled color 8 on the inside. And I really want to show you some more Western texture. It feels like a lot of people like the Western texture on the English tan Dublin. So let me know if I'm right about that. We've made a few different pieces in this Western Dublin. So English tan on the outside, it's a really beautiful look. You can see the depth of color down the spine, and that's because there's a wax finish on top of all the Dublin. So you get a little bit of a darker surface, and then once it's flexed, you have this lighter, more orangey tan undertone. I just think the texture on the Western really works with that waxy finish. Here's another one in Western texture, Western natural shell cordovan for this Bugs Moran. And here's another one that totally blew me away. Western black shell cordovan for the Fat Herbie. We have a matching hand-stained edge, and then Western black shell cordovan for the inside. And here's a good one that we haven't seen in a while. This is inverted shell cordovan in the color 8 color. You can see the inverted shell has these sort of burgundy drip marks that are on the shell side of the leather. So this is very flat, smooth, and shiny, where the back side is actually the reverse. And here's a look at the inside. Speaking of reverse, we have a reverse interior with the Horween USA measuring machine stamp. And I have another black chrome excel piece, black chrome excel on this Fat Herbie. Here's another Western English tan Dublin on a Fat Herbie. Here's a good one. Very thin English tan Dublin on a Fat Herbie that has been hand stitched. So if you want a thinner Herbie, I know it's ironically named, this would be a good option. Here's another Western texture on natural shell cordovan for a Fat Herbie. Got another marbled piece. This is marbled black shell cordovan, and you can see that the marbled black is not black at all. I know it's very confusing, but the marbled black, once you scrape off that finish, it becomes a little bit more orangey tan and slightly green in areas. Here's a look at the interior where you can see more marbled black. And here is an epic natural shell Fat Herbie with the Horween USA stamp in the center. You can see the epic texture on the natural shell is this figuring that you can see mostly on the left interior card holder, a little bit on the right, but that's a really dramatic look. Here's a look at the epic shell on the outside. And here's another cool Western natural piece. This one has the candy cane stitching, and this is a vertical Tony the Ant. Here's another look at that new Latigo leather and the color to match natural shell. This is the Tony the Ant with vertical card slots. A lot of people have been asking us for this one. Here's a look at the natural shell on the outside. And another Western texture, Western natural shell, vertical card slots, and the Tony the Ant with the bill slot in the back. Here's a good one, Tony the Ant in the teal cypress leather and teal horsehide Latigo on the inside. This Latigo, if you put wax on it, starts to look like this, and I can prove it by showing you the bursty pull-up effect of those undertones. It's the same color as on the inside, but with that wax put on top, and you can see how the wax transforms the color. We have a really interesting silver foil stamp on this one. Up next is another vertical Tony the Ant. This one has marbled cigar shell cordovan on the outside, which is really cool. It's like a nice brown. Sometimes you can see a little bit of green tones in the marbled cigar. On the interior, we have a reverse piece of cordovan. Up next is another Western Natural. This is a Tony the Ant in Western Natural. And here's another cool Scotch grain piece. Scotch grain color 8 shell cordovan, natural waxed and burnished edges. And then we have a reverse interior with a couple different cool stamps. And I think we're gonna leave it at this. This is a stunner for me too. Natural shell cordovan on a vertical 8-slot Bugs Moran. And we've got a ton of shell in this wallet, no stamps whatsoever, no branding from us, no branding from Horween, and then just a clean piece of natural shell on the outside. So there you go. What do you guys think of the psychedelic shell cordovan, and as well as this new experimental raw olive finish? I think this is really cool. I certainly hope that this color translates on the video because it is really, really striking. And if you want to pick up any of these items, they'll be going live this Friday, September 27th at 12 p.m. noon Central on our website, ashlandleather.com. Just click the private stock tab at the top. Or if you have any questions, just leave me a comment below. All right, thank you guys so much for your support. And until next time, I hope you have a good one.